G'day everybody. Alright, so I've spoken a lot about a lot of things and well, it's time to just get on with it, I think. We've basically finished planning out what we can do, at least as much as I can remember. I hadn't really practiced this in quite a number of years. It was pretty good back in the day, but anyway, I'm sure I've forgotten a whole lot of things. This lasting allowance is a little short because I don't think I allowed for the thickness of the insole board. So if you lasted this up like this, then the insole board's probably going to gobble up a couple of mil, and you're going to be left with a very small margin to actually stick to the insole board. So just add that all over, just as a bit of a safety thing. And I'm also reading the underlays for the lining and the heel counter is not really, like the heel counter especially is too short, which is a bit of a giveaway that I haven't got enough allowance somewhere. So we'll just run around and give ourselves an allowance on the bottom for what we've missed, using the dividers, because that's actually the more accurate way to do it. If you're not so good at drawing, you can just use your dividers. And wow, that's a rough line. But anyway, I'm going to clean it all up right now because I'm sick of the pencil and it's time to cut this bugger up. So you could actually approach this in a number of different ways. Honestly, I just like getting my knife and cutting these things up, but I'm going to do something funky with this. And my first cut is going to be on the Vamp center line, and I'm just going to cut that all the way up. Oops, there's a fingernail. All the way up. I cannot see the thing. The lighting here is terrible. And then from here, that doesn't need to be as accurate. I'm just going to lighting. Just going to finish off this cut, and I'll cut my allowance off here because honestly, I'll do it better and easier and quicker off this template that I'm making right now. Just got to remember which line is which. So the line I actually want is this one. Just hook that under a bit because 0 Hz. I didn't mean to take that last one off, but anyway. Probably saw nothing but the back of my head. Sliced off a fingernail because I can't really get in there. Alright, so again, we only need a certain amount of information from this. So let's presume that I cleaned up my eyelets and they're now perfectly spaced. Just roughly do that. Just find the center. That's probably a good rough coordinate for that. Just let this. Just bring that difference. So it looks a bit low. Let's just straighten it up. Right there. So I'm going to put it there. And that's about right. So I'll just break this. And okay, so I put the eyelets in. The other next important detail is the stay position. And if we were doing this properly, I would have drawn in the stay because it's an important part and we're going to mark it later. So let's draw in the stay. Alright, nice big and ugly. Look at that, that's terrible. But anyway, you'll take a bit more time. And then just cut that out. Because, well, that's your important information. I'm not going to be sure that I drew it. And I do a lot of correcting when I cut because, well, I've done a lot of cutting. Now, my teachers would have told me to cut like 5 extra blooming cuts like this. Alright, make a nice, sexy little slot that looks something like this. Alright, that's how my teachers used to cut those things. And then they put a little notch in one side. Honestly, this is great. This looks great, you know? Pro work. It takes flipping forever. This is how I did it. Alright, one cut, and again, I cannot see where my cut is, which is not helping. So my cut is here, which I still can't see. Okay, I can see. So my cut is here. So I'll come in and I'll just, in 2 cuts, do what they do in, what, 5 cuts? And it doesn't look as good, but honestly, it takes half the time of doing that. We're going to pretend that this curve I spent a lot of time on and really want to get right, so we'll just open that curve up. This we can just follow through here, so we don't need that. The style line for the sponge is like the stay. You can put it in now to save yourself coming back, or you can put it in later. Let's just put it in now, save us coming back. And yeah, after a while the 2 strokes turns into 1. Because in theory this is just for the pattern cutter's use, so you don't have to show this to your boss necessarily, or your customers. And for a derby, that's all the information I need. The next thing I'm going to do is make the lining. Because every video I've seen of you guys trying to make lining, you really struggle. So let's help you. Don't have a lot of cardboard here. Now, when you're making anything symmetrical, like a vamp, or a one-piece quarter, or a one-piece lining like I'm about to make, you should fold your cardboard. I don't have a big enough piece of cardboard. This piece would be that plus that, so it's going to come out here, so I'm going to have to bodge this up. I think what I'll do is cut this just in half. Trim off this rubbish. Quickly bodge smudge this stuff together. And I hope my rough guess of dimensionality was correct. Right, okay, so we want to make this big long thing, we want to make it symmetrical because our pattern is not non-symmetrical. Words failing. Alright, so the trick here is, that's right, I've already drawn the line in. So this is our fold line for our lining, right? So let's angle that so it'll actually fit on the paper. Alright, I'll just make sure we've got enough room for all of this. And then I will lose the position entirely because I'm working on the wrong side of the ruler. But anyway, thank you, camera. You're wonderful to work around. Lightly score this line because we want to make this fold. You'd be tempted to use these folds, but honestly, it's going to add a millimetre and make your centre line less accurate. So by scoring the paper and then folding that nicely, we should get an accurate centre line with a perfectly accurate centre, and then we can just produce our lining over the top. Alright, so remember there's an allowance on the upper for the close seam, so we want to set it in a little bit for the, because it's lining it on the inside, it has to go around the inside track of the curve, and so we'll just set our pencil in there so it pivots there, and we'll just line it up, bring it up, and make sure we don't lose too much here. We can tack it back on if there isn't enough, but I do like to just get it in one. Alright, so that's pretty much aligned with the corner. It's a bit off. Alright, that'll do. So, we'll get our pencil out. We'll throw in, break the pencil here. We'll throw in our, break your pencil, good on you. We'll get our pencil out and we'll mark our pattern. This because this is another way that you can do these slots, and I've just made a cut around this corner but I've put no seam in it. So another quick way to do this is to then run okay, I opened it right up. You can just run an oar down there to open it up. Slot anything. So we'll put this back on. We'll get our front angle, which is now very inaccurate because I moved everything and now everything's off. That's okay. You've got to get in practice of realigning these anyway. It'll happen at some point. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait, this is the lining. I don't need that, do I? Alright, so this is the lining. If I had made, I should have made the quarter first because then you can use the quarter as a template for this stage. And I forgot the bottom. Let's make the quarter first because of what I just said. Like I said, out of practice. Alright, but I haven't made a mistake here. We'll just put that aside. Alright, so we'll do basically the quarter. I didn't do first because there's nothing to do here. Alright, it's, have I got any lead there? Okay, it's literally just copy the thing for minutes. And screw that up. Okay, for the third time, we'll just copy this thing. Now, one of the points of accuracy that you want to maintain is the quarter alignment point. So if it's not marked clearly already, make sure that you mark this. And sometimes it's even great to put a little prick in there. I think that's it. Where have I done the eyelets? Alright, that's better. Okay. So we'll just finish this off. So we want a couple of mils of trim off allowance. See, stuff it up. I'm just going to freehand you. We want a couple of mils freehand of allowance around here. No, we don't. We want a bag lining, that's right. That's the lining. This is the quarter. Wake up, Gaza. Alright, so we'll put a bag top lining allowance here, and we put the allowance for the seam in already, I think. Yeah. So now we just cut it out. I'm going to adjust that shape a little bit. It's a bit intense. The allowance is probably still a fraction, so I'm actually going to just pour it a little bit, just a little bit extra on. Actually, no, that's a bad idea. That's a bad idea. Because you want to have the bottom underlays meet really accurately and nicely. You don't want one not to line up and one to line up. And you need to sort of build that into the pattern. Stay on target. Okay, so this is the quarter. So we'll smooth these lines out. It's been a while. I still just don't like derbies. Took the top off a little bit, but yeah, no one knows. Okay, so that's a quarter. Now that we've got a quarter, we can line this up here, right? Because we've already got all this done. Alright, so we want this allowance. Exactly. We want this top line. And I think that's about all we want. Break the pencil again. This cardboard's not flat. Pencil. Bring this down, get this corner accurate, and we don't need this, we don't need that. This is lining, so remembering from our diagram, we should come in about that much. So we'll come in about that much, it's about there, and we'll come up about that much, which is about there. So right, this is lining, so this needs to have the trim off allowance. this fat bottom bit. So here's where you really want to set this lasting allowance for the lining as different to whatever your upper is, because your upper's the structural part, the lining is non-structural. So let's say, imagine what it's going to look like, alright? If the upper is that much longer than the lining, then the upper, presuming you're gluing it down and doing a cement lasting, is going to have 5 mils all the way around it to solidly stick to the Texon board. Whereas if you have your lining longer than your upper, you're sticking your lining to your Texon, and then you're sticking your material, your upper, to the lining. You're not sticking it to the insole board, and that's structurally a flawed way to do. Structurally, a flawed way to do this stuff. Because if you're using cheap lining with laminations that are easily delaminated, then obviously your shoe's easily delaminated. So, right, like this, and then we just cut this bugger out. And notice how much, it's like 5 mils, I don't know, I just said that, didn't I? Yeah. And because I'm bodging this, I'm breaking everything. I should have got some sleep. Where was I? God, it's been ages since I've done some proper cutting. Feels like I've mucked up a bit here somewhere, no? Alright. Now that is good luck. Well, it's better. And you always want a centre mark. Now if you're doing this by hand, put a generous centre mark in the lasting allowance, because that will reduce the amount of material in this area to fold over. And even if you're dealing with a negligible lining, that's just good practice. And it doesn't hurt to put a few more even. They're all going to help you an amazing amount. Especially if you're using leather lining or a stiffer lining. Alright, so inside the shoe, when you stitch all this together, what we want this pattern to do is have this gap here, right? The leather will hold the shoe where we want on the last, which we determine by where this curve, the shape of this curve, right? It should be off the last at the top, it should be on the last at the peak of the heel, and it should cut pretty drastically underneath to allow for less material in the lasting area. And you want this huge gap here because this material, a lining material, will generally stretch a lot easier than your upper material. So it will be moulded into this shape quite easily and readily. Plus, by having this huge gap here, again, you're removing all this material, right? If you angle this the wrong way, the more this way, if the center line is angled out this way, then you can see that 1/2 centimetre here is actually going to give you a full, like if I put a centimetre here, you're going to get 2 centimetres in the overall. And when you look at your last, what you're actually trying to do with your pattern, your material in this area, is get it to close up. So by angling that center line like that, when you put your upper, right, when you've stitched your upper up, and before you start lasting, when you sit your upper on your last, it will sit basically almost with where you want it. It should sit roughly. If it sits right up here, then you've got your curves all out of whack, right? And if you grab the toe and just encourage it, it should sit. You should be able to get that thing by pulling the toe. You should get your entire, be able to, by pulling the toe on the upper, you should be able to get the whole thing to sort of at least sit roughly on the back height. And if it's back part molded, it should cup in there and sit down on the last as well. Which is why we did all these strange angle things in the beginning. So what's left? We've cut the lining, we've cut the quarter, we haven't cut the windows out, but you can do that however. I really should cut the vamp out because yeah, I'm gonna run out of video time. I'm gonna have to pause, and we'll do the vamp in a minute.